This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
It's our Michigan football spring game preview, next on Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Hit. Caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison.
Brady gets terrific. Throws it and a touchdown night again. Schultz just before Brazil got him. And a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris hacks a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, I'm Steve Deace. Welcome to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. And on Saturday, the Wolverines will take the field. Well, we had a public practice a week ago, but for a lot more people, this will be our first chance to get a look at the 2019 Michigan football team. And, you know, when you're talking about a spring game, and we're going to preview individual units, players, what to look for there with Michael Spath of WTKA in Ann Arbor, my partner at Wolverine Digest here, a little bit later on in this episode. But as somebody who's been a longtime fan, but has professionally covered college football as well, I kind of have my rules of how to watch a spring football game or how to read through the lines of a spring football report. Okay. And I've got those 5 rules. All right. So if you're looking forward to Michigan's spring game and you want to know what should I be taking away from it? All right. Let's start with number 1 here. All right. Spring games are both overrated and underrated at the same time. And it's because we tend to place emphasis on the wrong things, while that which should be emphasized is missed. Right. So, you know, we're looking at how an individual player plays. And, you know, every school has had their spring game heroes. I remember a few years ago, there was this linebacker from Texas, Grady Brooks. He was if George Steinbrenner ran Michigan football, he'd have nicknamed him, you know, Mr. March, Mr. April. Dude freaking owned the spring game. All right. And so we're looking at like individual players or, oh man, they backup quarterback, go running against 3s and 4s, threw the ball better than the starter. We have the wrong guy in there right now. All right. On the other hand, though, we don't know what it is we should be looking for. So we go the other extreme and just write it off. I wouldn't write it off either because it's a culmination of watching your team spend 15 practices laying the foundation to prepare for the season to come. And that brings us to the second rule, Steve's second rule of watching spring football. The first thing to understand is anything you see good in a team is at the expense of another facet of the same team. All right. So if you're watching, he's hurt, so it won't be Donovan Peoples-Jones. If you're watching Tariq Black go up and high point the ball repeatedly in the end zone, before you cheer, remember the guy he's doing that against is also wearing a winged helmet. Okay. And so that's where you got to make sure your enthusiasm doesn't go overboard, or your pessimism for that matter. Like if you get out there on Saturday and you find out that, one of these young corners that Michigan's recruited the last couple of years can't cover Mike Sandristella or Oliver Martin in the slot, while you should be concerned if they don't hold their own, that also speaks to the fact those guys are good players. Okay. So it works both ways here. Whatever bad happens means something good also happened to the Wolverines. And whatever good happens also means something bad, because everything that takes place is at the expense of the team they're going against. And in that case, that's the same team. So that's why you need to throw your hyper enthusiasm and pessimism out the window and look at this a little more holistically and from a more balanced perspective. All right. It's more binary. The next rule of watching spring games is most coaches will set up a spring game to do two things: avoid injuries and then showcase the team, especially the quarterbacks. So when you see a player or players or a unit or units set up to succeed struggle, it could just be a bad day, or it could be a sign of things to come. Think of a couple of recent springs. 2008, that was Rich Rod's first spring, and that offensive performance was abysmal. What did we go on to see during the season? They didn't have a quarterback that could run the system, and they were abysmal. 2017, that spring game is still online. And go watch that if you want. What you're going to see is, man, those young defensive players like Devin Bush and the like really flashed. So you saw, hey, there's going to be plenty of talent there. There's not going to be a major drop-off on that side of the ball. But you also saw that we couldn't protect the quarterback whatsoever. What did we see when the season came to be? Michigan had one of the worst past pro seasons in school history in 2017. All right. So when there's a showcase element, a couple of years ago when Auburn brought Jarrett Stidham in as a high profile transfer, they set up a spring game system for him to show off. You know what that means? He needs to show off. Well, he did. And it portended good things to come for the season to come. Jarrett Stidham was really good his first year at Auburn back in 2017 and had them one game away from playing in the college football playoff. So when there is a showcase element, and if the unit that's being showcased can't stand up to the occasion, it could be a bad day, okay? But it also could be a bad omen of what's coming come September. Rule number 4 of watching spring football: the basic identity and foundation of a team is laid in the spring. But that's not necessarily an indicator of its W and L's once the season arrives. Just how a team will attempt to manage that record. But whether I've been a fan who's been given up close access or a media member, I have never seen a team whose basic identity in the spring wasn't the same thing we saw once the season arrived. Okay, let me give you a few examples. Years ago, when I was on the Iowa State football beat, and I, covering them in the spring, and they had a guy named Seneca Wallace transfer in who was so much better than everybody else, it was pretty clear that as long as he was on the field, they were going to be really competitive. Without him, not so much. And that's exactly what we saw the 2 years that he was there. In 2011, I was permitted to come to a couple of the closed practices in Brady Hoke's first spring at Michigan. And what really stood out to me is the defensive front was going to be the strength of that team. With guys like Mike Martin and Ryan Van Bergen and Will Campbell and a pretty good group of linebackers on that team as well. Now, keep in mind that the defense is what got the previous coach fired. But you could see that defensive front seven was going to be one of the identifiable core strengths of that team, along with a known quantity like Denard Robinson. Well, what did we see when we got to the season? What unit way overperformed all of its preseason expectations and was probably the main reason why Michigan went 11-2 and won a BCS Bowl that year? It was a very underrated defensive front that made a huge leap in improvement from what it had been under the previous regime. So individual players will rise and fall. Okay. It's a long time. These are young men. I mean, you're so much different at 18 than you were, or 21 than you were at 18. And you're so much different at 25 than you were at 21 and 30 than you were at 25. All right. So, the younger we are, the faster the development comes on an individual basis. But the holistic identity of a team, and I again go back to 2017, is the team we saw in the spring, the exact team we saw in the fall. Yeah. We saw a team that couldn't protect the quarterback. We saw a quarterback that wasn't on the same page with his receivers. And we saw a defense didn't look like it was going to miss a beat from all the guys that lost to the NFL. What did we see on the field? Well, that's exactly what we saw. I mean, that is exactly what we saw. All right, so the basic identity of a foundation of a team is laid now. Now, which individual players will play into that or enhance it or take away from it is still to be determined throughout the offseason. But the holistic identity of a team, you're going to see laid come spring. And that brings us to our final rule for watching spring football. Pay careful conditioning or careful concentration on the physical conditioning of the players, particularly the 2s and the 3s if you can, because that might give you either a look at the team's overall commitment to winter conditioning or the drop off after the 1s, as in the depth or the both. I go back to the last year for Mike Riley at Nebraska and watching their spring game and watching on television where it shouldn't be as obvious. The difference in the eye test between the 2s and the 3s compared to the first string, the drop off was precipitous. And, that went on to be a team that went 4-8, got the coach fired. Why does that matter? Because football is a violent sport. There's going to be injuries. Okay. You're not going to play with all of your starters in all 12 games. It's simply not going to happen. There are guys that fans don't know that they're going to need to know for the right reasons for your team to reach the expectations that every fan base has right now. So you want to know, for example, when it comes to Michigan this spring, that starting front 4 is going to be pretty good, even with the losses. All right, Kwity Paye, Josh Uche, Carlo Kemp. That's going to be a pretty good unit. What about behind them? Look to see what's the drop off there between when a Donovan Jeter comes in and a Carlo Kemp goes out. Look at where the drop off is there. There's still going to be some pretty good linebackers there. Josh Ross has played here a lot. Devin Gill's played here a lot. What's the drop off when Cam McGrone, a former highly decorated recruit, when he comes in? You want to be looking at that depth. It tells you, what their commitment was during the offseason to get ready for the conditioning part of the offseason, to get ready for the rest of it. But B, it gives you an idea what kind of depth you have in a sport that will test your depth probably more than any other sport will. So now that we've kind of taken a big picture view of spring football at Michigan, what individual specific things should we be looking for? We'll talk about that next with Michael Spath of WTKA in Ann Arbor and WolverineDigest.com next. Thank you to all of you that are supporting us here on Patreon. We get asked frequently, hey, what can we do to support what you guys are doing here at Michigan Podcast? And one of the best ways to do that is to support us with a very inexpensive nominal contribution at Patreon. And as you can see, throughout the course of the year for our Patreon supporters, we do give you exclusive content we don't offer anywhere else, just as a way of saying thank you. So to all of you that have supported us throughout the year at Patreon, thank you. Thank you in advance to those of you who are willing to sign up and do so in the future, and go blue. All right, as promised, Michael Spath from WTKA in Ann Arbor and Wolverine Digest joins us now here on Michigan Podcast. Go blue, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing great, guys.
So, Michael, let's look ahead to the spring football game on Saturday, and let's just get this out of the way right now. All right.
Let's talk about the spring-controlled scrimmage on Saturday.
Yes. All right. I have been critical of the Big Ten Network at times. I think the SEC Network, by and large, is a far superior product, okay? That being said, I don't believe for a second that a league that in the dead of August sends a full production crew to Piscataway, New Jersey, to watch a thud practice in shorts with Rutgers on the precipice of another 1-11 diatribe called the season, had no interest in putting their biggest national brand on television for 2 hours in the dead of April with nothing else on. I don't believe that for a second. Okay, so why is this game not on TV, Michael?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of spring games on Saturday in the Big Ten, and I believe there's actually three other live ones. You might have the BTN schedule. So I think it was like a perfect excuse to say, well, we've got all these other things scheduled, and maybe Michigan doesn't really want it. I find it hard to believe, and God love them, because they make up our base here. But some people really got to check themselves and ask themselves if they've got if their brain is working, because they only announced in the last week or so that it'd be a controlled scrimmage and not a game, and yet people think that these decisions got made to not broadcast it because it's going to be a scrimmage and not a game.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the last day and a half, like does someone actually think that the Big Ten Network just decided yesterday that this was going to be they're not going to do it because Michigan announced it was going to be a controlled scrimmage? No, they've been knowing this for weeks. They've known this for quite a while that Michigan wasn't going to do a full-on game. I'm sure that Michigan, coaxed this along a little bit. Hey, guys, you don't want to come out and see us. That's okay. You got a lot of other things going on. No, I don't believe that the Big Ten Network just said, oh, yeah, we're not going to put Michigan on.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine not putting Ohio State on, right? I mean, give me a break. So, now, I think this is much more Michigan directed than the Big Ten Network directed. And having it Michigan directed is downright silly. I've heard the arguments, well, they're going to do a scrimmage instead of a game, so what's the point? Well, the point is you've got, what percentage of your fan base that lives outside of Ann Arbor and within hour driving distance that comes in every week for these games, so you want to showcase a little bit. Oh, well, they didn't have the entire offense in, and they don't want to look bad. Really? They don't want to look bad in a spring game that's 5 months removed from the season that no one's going to look back and go like, oh, hell, they didn't look good in their spring game. They're not going to have a good team this year. No, nobody cares about that. Oh, well, they're injured and they can't do a full game. Every team is injured. They're just, Steve, the excuses that people come up with to explain away why Michigan treats its fans like they are paying customers and not a fabric of this program, it's impressive, because Michigan has duped all these people and convinced them somehow that this is okay and that they shouldn't ask for more.
Well, having worked in national broadcasting and being a fan of this team, so being on both sides of an equation, and I guess the third side being a beat writer. So when you are a beat writer, access is the name of the game to do your job adequately. Here's what I believe happened. What I believe happened is similar to when Wisconsin and the upper Midwest teams started canceling their spring games with the late winter blast last year. And then Michigan jumped on and said, yeah, it could be terrible. Let's cancel it. All right. That was a convenient excuse. I think the same thing here. I think Michigan, as you put it, coaxed along, let the BTN kind of fill up their schedule, then say, and our spring game's going to be April 13th at 4 o'clock. And, oh, man, sucks. BTN's not going to be here. Oh, man, too bad. But we'll have it anyway. The idea that you get some competitive advantage over this, Alabama has literally been switching coordinators on a perennial basis. They're on national television every single spring. I watch about 30 spring games around the country a year to get ready for help me get ready for the offseason and the next season. And every one of these is a controlled scrimmage. No quarterbacks are being taken to the ground. That's a terrible excuse as well. And unless they're going to confiscate all y'all's phones when you walk in, how the hell are they going to stop anything from getting out to the public? This makes no sense why Michigan would not want a 2-hour commercial for its football program. It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't give them any advantage whatsoever at all. None.
Yeah, don't get me started on the whole advantage idea. It's one of the greatest myths in sports, especially in college football. This idea, I mean, let's just talk about what something, my colleague Zach Shaw and myself and Matt Misler on WTKA said repeatedly. You and I had conversations about it. Remember all those talks about, well, we've only installed 50% of our playbook. And people come saying, well, they've got stuff that they're holding back for Ohio State. Well, did they hold anything back for Ohio State? No, they didn't. There are some myths where I don't know the IQ of the average person that believes these things, but they get bandied about consistently, and I can't believe people haven't figured this out yet. You don't get any type of advantage from not showcasing yourself in the spring. If it was, Michigan would have beaten Notre Dame last year, or Michigan would have beaten Utah in 2015. The fact of the matter is Michigan opens up with Middle Tennessee, then they play Army, then they have a bye week, then they play Wisconsin. By the time that they get to Wisconsin, okay, there's going to be no more surprises. We're going to see what type of team we have. They don't hold back playbooks and offensive philosophies. They might hold back a couple of plays here and there, but those are trick plays. They're not holding back their offense to unveil it against the Buckeyes or unveil it against Michigan State. That just doesn't take place. And so, no, the idea that somehow there is a group of fans that incredibly believe that Michigan is right to not have a spring game and not have it televised because they're trying to create an advantage for themselves. And as long as that holds water, and they go into that Middle Tennessee game and they haven't shown Middle Tennessee any of their offense from Josh Gaddis, then that's a big win for Michigan. My God, people, wake the hell up, because this is downright idiotic.
Well, if maybe they simply did it to get Michael Spath's lazy ass off his couch there in suburban Detroit and to come to the spring game. So it worked because you have to go now, right? So let's talk about what you are expecting, hoping, and not wanting to see on Saturday. So let's use all three of those, all right? Let's start with what you're expecting to see on Saturday.
What I'm expecting to see is similar to what I was told happened this past Saturday, which is a lot of running through drills. I expect in maybe about the last 30 minutes or so for Michigan to line up offense versus defense at the 35-yard line, run a handful of plays, flip the side of the ball. To have what the idea of a controlled scrimmage is they're not playing like a football game. They're not kicking off. They're not doing probably full on tackling. The quarterbacks can't be hit. They're going to be moving the ball to where they want the ball to be, as opposed to like the offense or defense earning it, right? Mm-hmm. So if say Ambry Thomas picks off a pass, returns it to the 38-yard line. Well, Michigan's not going to start its next possession on the 38-yard line. They're just going to take the ball back and put it at the 35. Like, that's what a controlled scrimmage is. They just the coaches dictate the situations. So that's what we're going to see on Saturday.
What do you hope to see on Saturday?
I hope to see, I don't expect to see offensive philosophy. I don't expect to see, defense of new blitz packages. All I really want to see are young guys that we've heard a little bit about this spring and see them with my own two eyes. I want to see Donovan Jeter at defensive tackle. I want to see Ambry Thomas at cornerback. I want to see Vincent Gray at cornerback. I want to see the young linebackers, Cam McGrone and Jordan Anthony. I want to see Aiden Hutchinson, how he's performing at defensive end. I want to see offensively someone like Ben Van Sumeren, someone like True Wilson, see what those guys are bringing at the running back spot. I want to see Tariq Black. I want to see Eric Gall. We've heard about, I would say, 8 to 10 names this spring as standouts. Mike Sanastrill, the wide receiver, is another one. I want to see if the coaches are hyping these guys up, or why the coaches are hyping these guys up. I want to see with my own two eyes what some of the young players, some of the potentially breakout players look like they could do in certain situations. That's all I'm expecting to see. Mm-hmm. I'm not expecting to see veterans go out there and ball out. I'm not expecting to go figure out who the starting quarterback is or how close the competition is between Shea Patterson and Dylan McCaffrey. I'm not expecting to know who the starter is at right tackle or any of those, hotly contested position battles. All I want to see are those guys we've heard a little bit more consistently about this spring and see them with my own two eyes and see if they're worth the hype.
And then what would you be the most disappointed to see on Saturday? An injury to a key player aside. What else?
I'd be disappointed if Michigan runs their controlled scrimmage is 20 minutes long and there's no tackling. I'd be disappointed if someone like Mike Sanastrill, who we've talked a lot about, doesn't get the ball. I'd be disappointed if, they blow the whistle, anytime there's going to be, contact. So I'd be more disappointed, depending on how the coaches handle it. And with all the guys that we've heard so much about, if those guys sit out, or someone like Mike Sanistril, this early enrolled freshman, they've been hyping, if they decide, like, you know what, we don't want anybody to see what this kid's capable of, and so we're just not going to feature him. We're not going to throw him the ball in this controlled scrimmage. That would disappoint me, is if they don't showcase anything to the fans that can get the fans excited about for the 2019 football season.
We'll have you back next week to break down individual players and units that you saw. But in general, before we let you go, what's the mood there heading into this spring game about the team, its prospects for the fall, the trajectory of the program? Is it essentially the Josh Gaddis hype machine? Is it in full effect right now, or are people still digging out from a disappointing Sweet 16 loss for the basketball team?
Well, I don't think I don't think they're digging out from the basketball season. I think they're ready to move on from that. We crowned a national champion in Virginia on Monday night. I honestly think, Steve, that from what I gather with the people that I interact with on social media that call up the show, I'm a little surprised. I'll be honest. I'm a little surprised that here we are in April, that we're getting ready for Michigan's spring game, and there is a significant portion of the fan base that is still in this wait-and-see mode, that doesn't believe any of the talk this spring, that's not excited about spring hype and who are the guys. They're, from what I gather, now maybe it's just because I'm a critical component of this, or a critical person in this program, and maybe they're just all, like my followers, and not necessarily, maybe I've like pushed the people that are dissenters from me away. But most of the people I interact with are very much in the, come talk to me late October when Michigan's beaten Notre Dame, beaten Penn State. Come talk to me when Michigan's beaten Ohio State. I think that this program is at a turning point moment where if they don't go out there and have a 11-1 season and beat the Buckeyes, I mean, people are ready to really throw up their hands and be like, and not be done with Jim Harbaugh or be done with Michigan football, but essentially just say, like, all right, this is what it is. There's a growing, significant element of this fan base that needs to see a championship and needs to see a victory of Ohio State for them to buy back into what this program's selling.
Michael Spath from WTKA in Ann Arbor and Wolverine Digest. Have fun at the Big House on Saturday, Michael, and we'll have some coverage there from you and me as well at Wolverine Digest, and then we'll talk about it right here next week on Michigan Podcast. We'll see you then. Go Blue.
Sounds good, guys. Looking forward to it.
Take care. If you like what we do here, WolverineDigest.com is the website. We update it frequently with commentary. If you don't want to wait until Tuesday and when a new episode gets unveiled each week, keep updated each and every week at WolverineDigest.com. Both myself and Michael Spath from WTKA in Ann Arbor write commentary there each and every day. WolverineDigest.com. This week's Twitter poll results, which seems ironic given what we were just talking about a little while ago, Michigan and the BTN on the spring football game. But until this moment, it did seem as if Coach Harbaugh has been more open and transparent and revealing than what we've seen in the past. So we asked you, are we seeing a new and more open Coach Harbaugh this spring? And 82% of you said, yeah. I would still say the answer to that question, if I voted, is still yes. This silly thing with the BTN and not putting the game on TV notwithstanding. But yeah, I mean, we've had multiple press conferences. He's essentially given out what amounts to a depth chart. I mean, it's been crazy around here. Wow. Let's get to our question of the week. And it's on basketball. Philip Gravel says, hey, the Big Ten hasn't won the NCAA tournament now since 2000. How does that compare to other conferences? Well, the Big Ten is tied with most Final Four appearances since 2001. Michigan State and Wisconsin were in the Final Four in 2000. Sparty won it. That's the last time that a Big Ten team won the national championship. So since then, the Big Ten has put 14 teams in the Final Four, same as the ACC. That's tops amongst all leagues. And that's 14 appearances by 7 different universities. All right. But the Big Ten's title drought is the second longest compared to only the Pac-12, which has the longest, which probably doesn't surprise a lot of people. They've not won it since Lute Olson in Arizona won it in 1997. But they've also only had 5 teams make the Final Four since then. Well, the Big Ten has had 14 teams. So it seems odd. I mean, the Pac-12 has some systemic issues competitively happening in that league right now. I mean, the Big Ten has been right there as the elite or alongside the ACC as, with them as the elite conference in America for the better part of 2 decades. It's just that they haven't been able to get to that next step and win the college basketball tournament championship there in March Madness. So it's not the longest drought, but it's certainly the longest drought for a league that has as many Final Four appearances as the Big Ten does. That'll do it for our episode here this week. Want to thank everybody that made it possible, starting with our friends at Detroit Sports Podcast, which helped to get the word out about this show each and every week. Want to thank all of you that watch us here on YouTube. Please like and subscribe. And hey, we're getting really close to 5,000 subscribers here on our YouTube channel. Could you maybe help us get over the hump here in honor of spring football arriving in Ann Arbor? We would appreciate that. If you listen on the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, etc., leave us a 5-star review there too. We would appreciate that. And keep sharing what we do here with every Michigan fan you know. Until next week, we'll break down the spring football game right here on Michigan Podcast. Go Blue.